Wednesday, the 12th of December 2012. Mistakes. Are you sitting down? I hope so, because this post might surprise you. I made a mistake. Yeah, I know, it happens. Just breathe. Deep cleansing breaths. Are you breathing now? Good. No, this is not the first mistake I've ever made, just ask my wife. Now, I don't usually like being wrong, because being wrong usually makes me look bad, and I don't like looking bad. But sometimes things just work out so that even though I'm wrong, the guy who is right looks bad. I guess that doesn't make much sense, but I guarantee you it will by the end of this. A fine gentleman was brought to my trauma bay having been involved in a rollover motor vehicle accident. And by fine gentleman, I mean he was shabbily dressed, cursing like a sailor and reeking of alcohol. The medic informed me that this guy had admitted to drinking, and this set the patient off in a frenzy. I never said that. This guy's a frickin' liar. What are you, frickin' liar? Get over here, frickin' liar! I almost had to restrain him from jumping off the gurney and attacking the medic, who, understandably, left in a hurry. On my initial assessment, he definitely smelled strongly of alcohol, and he was certainly acting like just another drunk driver. He continued acting belligerent and obnoxious, so I tried calming him by talking to him the way I talk to my children, soft tones and a calm voice. I very calmly and politely informed him that we could do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way for him was to act like a nice boy and cooperate. The hard way was for me to chemically sedate him and do my workup without him interfering.
Talk to me like that! And don't think that about me, boy!
Really? This is his response to politeness and good manners? After a few more calming words, he finally relented and started acting almost like a human being, though he continued to threaten the medic who was long gone. Still, despite how he was acting and how he smelled throughout his workup, he vehemently insisted he was not drunk. He had a small laceration on his head and a concussion, so I got a CT scan of his brain. Fortunately, he was okay and it was negative. But that wasn't the only thing that was negative. His blood alcohol level was 0. Astounded, I made sure the lab hadn't mixed up his sample. Nope, it was 0. I closed his laceration with a few sutures and sent him on his merry way. Even though I had been nothing but polite to him, he continued cursing at me and my staff until he was out the door. After he left, I sat and wondered why he smelled of alcohol. Maybe someone spilled a drink on him? Maybe he uses bourbon as aftershave? Regardless, I couldn't believe he had actually been telling the truth. Yes, he was right and I was wrong. But that could mean only one thing. The reason he was acting like an a-hole isn't because he was drunk. It's simply because he's an a-hole. Sunday, the 16th of December 2012. Gross Anatomy. I got the following email request from George, yes, his real name, asking about my years as a medical student. My name is George, I'm currently in medical school in this place, so I know practically nothing. I stumbled upon your blog and it's amazing. My friends and I now start to sit down, laugh where appropriate, and discuss what you talk about. Plus, your entries are pretty regular for someone as busy as yourself. Very impressive. Ever thought of writing an entry reminiscing on your past life as a med student? Would be great to know what you experienced. Keep up the great work, George. Well, George, I would like to reflect on my years as a medical student for a moment and remember them with fondness. I would like to do that, but I really can't because it was several years of unimaginable torture. Okay, that's a gross exaggeration. My residency was unimaginable torture. Medical school, on the other hand, was more, well, like a really annoying itch that you keep scratching but it just won't go away. My father went to medical school 30 years before I did, and his father did about 30 years before that. My grandfather liked to tell the story on the first day of medical school. The dean assembled all the students in the auditorium and then told him, look at the student to your left. Now look to the student on your right. Now remember this, 2 of the 3 of you will not be here on graduation day. Ouch. By the time I started medical school, this was no longer the case. Students were weeded out in college by such evil devices as organic chemistry, a full year form of torture just slightly more painful than the machine from The Princess Bride. But before I started, my father told me that medical school isn't necessarily hard. There are very few difficult concepts to learn. It isn't multivariable calculus, quantum mechanics, or special relativity. No, what makes medical school difficult is simply the sheer volume of knowledge that medical students are forced to memorize. Anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, pathology, microbiology, epidemiology, histology, embryology, pharmacology. I can't say that one. Immunology. On my first day, I happily and nervously received my course schedule for the year, and there it was, on page 1, staring at me, taunting me. Gross anatomy. Of course I knew it would be there, but just seeing the words on the page gave me pause. I will be dissecting a real person. I had dissected small animals in school, but never anything like this. This was... I didn't exactly know what it was, but all of a sudden, medical school seemed real. It got even more real later that day when we got our tour of the gross lab. When I first walked in, the smell of formaldehyde was so strong it may as well have slapped me across the face. Now I know why it's called gross anatomy, I thought. We split into groups of 4, and we found our assigned cadaver, all of which were wrapped in plastic. I was in charge of opening the plastic bag, and despite my trembling hands, I got it opened. And there she was, our cadaver, Rose. Not her real name. Very thin, grey hair, arms folded neatly over her chest, eyes just slightly ajar. Rose was an elderly lady who looked like she could have been anyone's grandmother. The class started with no real drama. No one fainted, no one dropped out. We started dissecting very timidly. But after the first day, the nervousness was gone. The anatomy was absolutely fascinating. But over the next several months, there were some oddities in the gross lab and questions that arose that simply couldn't be answered. When we got to the chest, we could instantly tell who smoked and who didn't. Rose did. Is that what killed her? And Rose's liver was green instead of the usual rust colour. Why? Was that her cause of death? The cadaver next to us was hung like a porn star. Could he have been? Another cadaver on the other side of the lab had a transplanted kidney in his pelvis, and another was missing a lung. Who were these people? As the months progressed, I learned more about anatomy than I could have ever dreamed. Muscles, nerves, arteries, veins, glands, internal organs, the brain and brainstem, tendons, bones, ligaments, and all real, not just pictures in a textbook. Real. Gross anatomy is a course unlike any other. It isn't just memorizing facts, it's memorizing what structure is what and how it's all connected to everything else. That's what makes it so difficult, but all the same, so satisfying. Looking back at my first day of gross anatomy, it was painfully clear that no one knew exactly how to act. Several people cracked nervous jokes, some people whispered, but I just stared silently at the person who would eventually become the best teacher I ever had in my life. To this day, I have no idea how Rose died, or why she had decided to donate her body to our medical school. But when I first laid eyes on her, I still vividly remember my first thought was thanks. Thursday, the 20th of December 2012. Phrases. I'm sure this is true in all languages, but there are a lot of phrases in the English language that don't make a whole lot of sense. It's a dog-eat-dog world. Okay, maybe some dogs are viciously competitive, but have you ever seen a dog actually eat another dog? I slept like a baby. No, you didn't. You slept all night. Babies wake up screaming every 2 hours. He wants to have his cake and eat it too. What's the point of having cake if you're not going to eat it? It's the bee's knees. It's... Wait, what? What the hell does that even mean? But other phrases make perfect sense. I'm as happy as a pig in slop. Yeah, pigs look pretty happy wallowing in mud. That one like clockwork. Sure, fine. Clocks are incredibly intricate. It's as smooth as silk. Self-explanatory. So what the hell am I getting at? What exactly does this have to do with anything? Just wait. I promise it will make sense in a moment. A very boisterous, my nice way of saying obnoxiously loud, man was brought to my trauma bay having been allegedly assaulted by 5 other men. His main complaint was a headache due to a gash on his forehead. Oh, and my fists hurt too. Your fists hurt? I hadn't heard that one before. Yeah, Doc, I think I knocked one of them the frick out. Lovely. My main complaint was that he smelled like a dirty diaper that had been dipped in booze. He and his buddies that he had been brawling with had drunk at least a dozen bottles of something, so he had done the only logical and gentlemanly thing he could think to do. He emptied his bladder all over himself during the ambulance ride. Yes, on purpose. We peeled his pants off his legs and tried to dispose of them. The pants, not the legs. Though, trust me, The temptation was there. But the stench wouldn't seem to go away. We continued with our workup, desperately trying to ignore the odour. In the midst of everything, it turned out that his only available form of identification was an armband with his name and date of birth on it. The armband from the prison with which he had been released the day before. So naturally, he had decided to celebrate his release by drinking and fighting. Fortunately, he hadn't done any major damage and had no major injuries, so he received a few stitches in his forehead for his trouble, and I sent him on his merry way. The police were only too happy to take him right back. After this experience, I've added piss drunk to the second list. Sunday, the 30th of December 2012. Stupid doctor. It's that time again. Time for another post about stupid doctors. This time, you may be surprised that the stupid doctor is a trauma surgeon. You may be even more surprised to learn who the stupid trauma surgeon is. Me. Okay, granted, I wasn't a trauma surgeon at the time, I was still a doctor in training, so I can at least use that as an excuse. But it was one of those moments in my professional life when I deserved a well-earned slap to the forehead. I had only been a doctor for about a year, and was rotating through the intensive care unit trying to learn how to take care of the sickest patients. Heart transplants, sepsis, strokes, heart attacks, surgical catastrophes, you name it. These patients are the worst of the worst, the sickest of the sick, and many of them never make it out. The patients who can't breathe on their own need mechanical ventilation, and this can be very uncomfortable and disorientating for them. Many of these unfortunate patients can become severely agitated, and sedation often isn't enough. One such patient was an elderly woman who was having an exacerbation of her emphysema. She was intubated, on the ventilator, and fighting it furiously. The nurses had to attend to her constantly in attempts to calm her, but she seemed to be inconsolable, banging on the bed rails, pulling at her IV lines, and generally being a pain in the ass. All of the nurses had had it with her. Around 10 PM as I was making my nighttime rounds, she seemed particularly disturbed. I looked at her chart and noticed that their name looked German. All of a sudden, a light bulb turned on. Perhaps the nurses were having trouble calming her because she doesn't speak the language. I studied the German language for 4 years in school, so perhaps I could talk to her in her own language. I could be a hero. I walked timidly into the room, and her fierce blue eyes immediately narrowed and locked onto mine. I took a deep breath, racked my brain for the right words, and started telling her that she was okay. Everything was fine, and she needed to concentrate on her breathing. She immediately calmed down ever so slightly, and her eyes opened wide. She understood. I continued talking to her in very soothing tones, explaining in very broken German that her lungs were sick, but we were giving her medicine to make it better. At least I was pretty sure that's what I said. Either that, or I said that her lamp cow is sad yesterday and needed more painted Wednesday. Anyway, by the time I was done, she was perfectly calm, she was breathing more easily, and she actually had a hint of a smile on her face. 3 of the ICU nurses watched open-mouthed as I strode confidently out of the room. "What did you say to her?" one of them asked. I simply told them that I explained her situation to her in her own language, and I continued on my rounds. When I came in the next day, she had clearly gotten better because she was no longer on the ventilator. She was breathing on her own and looked much more comfortable, and still calm. I walked into her room and reintroduced myself, and after I finished my examination, I asked if she had any recollection of our conversation. I wasn't surprised to learn that she didn't. The sedatives can often interfere with memory formation, so I filled her in on the details. "But I'm not German." "What? What do you mean?" I asked her. "I'm Norwegian. My husband was German. I don't speak any German at all." Well then, I guess her lamp cow really was sad after all. Again, Sunday 30th of December 2012. Texting and driving is stupid, but I've already ranted enough about that. Drunk driving is even more stupid. Sure, I could end this post here, but everyone knows all of this. I bet even the idiot drunk drivers are thinking, "My god, what the hell am I doing?" while they're doing it. So what the hell is my point? Unless you've been living under a rock, which is probably one of the safer places to be these days, driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol isn't the only stupid thing you can do at the wheel. You have also heard of drowsy driving. What? You haven't? Have you been living under a rock? Put simply, drowsy driving is driving when you should be sleeping. About 1 in 6 fatal traffic accidents can be attributed to driver fatigue, which can impair judgment, delay reaction times, and impairs coordination. Sound like anything else? Exactly. It's been shown to be at least as dangerous as drunk driving, if not more so. Yet another car accident victim was being brought to me at 2 AM on a night when I had already had 15 patients come in. I was tired, I was cranky, and I was in no mood for another freaking moron who had thoroughly earned a trip to my trauma bay. Unfortunately, that's exactly what rolled through the door. A very large woman rolled in on the gurney, and the medics were having a very difficult time stifling their laughter as they told me why she was there. She had just been prescribed a new medicine, one that notoriously causes drowsiness. She had taken her first dose that evening and had supposedly discovered another side effect, a severe case of the stupids. So in the middle of the night, already drowsy from sleep deprivation and her new medicine, she thought it would be a fantastic idea to go out for nachos. And much to the surprise of no one, she fell asleep and ran off the road into a tree. Fortunately, she was not seriously injured, and after a negative workup, I sent her on her way. I have no idea if she stopped for a snack on the way home.